What if Ned Stark defied the Night's Watch and sent Jon Snow to the Iron Throne instead? Imagine the bastard son of Winterfell crowned king while dragons still soared and Lannisters plotted. The Raven came in the dead of night, cloaked in frost and dread. Ned Stark stood alone in the Godswood, snow collecting in his beard, eyes locked on the message that would change the course of Westeros forever. Robert Baratheon was dead. The Iron Throne was vulnerable. And the Lannisters, they were already moving. Inside the candle-lit halls of Winterfell, Maester Luwin waited quietly for Lord Stark's decision. The original plan had been simple: send Jon to the Wall, let him vanish into shadow and oath, away from the chaos of politics and blood-soaked crowns. But now everything was different. Catelyn's words haunted Ned like a storm. He is not one of ours. Yet deep in his heart, Jon Snow was his. More than Robb, more than Bran, because Jon carried the burden of a truth so dangerous it could rip the realm in half. He stood for hours in silence, until dawn cracked the sky and the Godswood glistened like glass. Then he made the decision that would shatter everything. Jon wouldn't go to the Wall. He would go to King's Landing. Jon didn't understand it at first. "The Night's Watch, you are not a Stark, Jon," Ned said, voice sharp but eyes soft. "But you are not a Snow either. You are something more, and this realm will need more than swords and oaths before this winter ends." They left the next day with a small guard and a sealed letter. Robb watched them ride out with narrowed eyes. Catelyn didn't even come to say goodbye. The roads were dangerous. Rumours whispered of Lannisters amassing gold cloaks, of Tywin raising armies. Jon, still wearing black, rode through the riverlands with unease in his gut. His dreams were strange: flames, blood, a shadowed throne made of swords, and a voice, a woman's voice, calling his name from beyond the wall of fire. When they reached King's Landing, chaos had already begun. Ned's letter reached the small council first. In it he named Jon Snow, not Robb, not Stannis, not Renly, as the true heir to the Iron Throne. And he did not stop there. He named Jon's mother, Lyanna Stark. He named his father, Rhaegar Targaryen. The city cracked under the weight of that name. Jon didn't even have time to process the truth. He was shoved into the Red Keep like a weapon being drawn, every eye either hungry or horrified. Varys watched with unreadable curiosity. Littlefinger smirked. Cersei's eyes burned with quiet war. Then came the dragons. Daenerys Targaryen's ships had crossed the narrow sea days before Jon arrived. She expected to burn the city. Instead, she found a boy claiming her brother's name, her throne, backed by the last honest man in Westeros. And Jon. He didn't want any of it. "You want me to rule?" he hissed to Ned in private. "They hate me. They call me bastard, Targaryen, traitor." "They called your father worse," Ned replied, "but he died for nothing." "No, he died for you." The council was split. Faisal nearly choked on the blood of his own tongue, trying to denounce Jon as a fraud. But when Varys stood and said, "A dragon with the blood of wolf and fire may be what we need," the chamber went silent. That silence didn't last long. Cersei refused to kneel. She sealed the gates of the Red Keep and called her bannermen to war. Jaime stood at her side, golden hand clenched, unsure which brother he hated more, Tyrion the rebel or Jon the usurper. And in the streets of King's Landing the people began to whisper. The bastard king, the wolf dragon. Jon didn't speak much. He walked the halls like a ghost, refusing luxuries, avoiding the throne room altogether. Ned tried to protect him, but even he could see the fire rising behind his son's eyes. Then Daenerys sent her envoy. Missandei arrived first. Then came Grey Worm. Then came Drogon. The dragon didn't burn the castle, not yet, but it circled, every wing beat shaking the capital. Jon stood in the courtyard, staring up into the sky as if daring it to end him. Dany came on the third day, and for the first time in her life, she was unsure of her place. Jon was calm, cold, polite. "You are the last Targaryen," she said. "I didn't ask to be," he replied. "They stole our family's legacy. And what would you do to take it back?" Her eyes flashed. "Whatever I must." Jon didn't flinch. "Then you're no different than the rest." That night, Varys visited Jon alone. "There are two kinds of rulers," he said, voice like oil on water. "The kind that are feared, and the kind that are loved. Which will you be?" Jon said nothing. But the next morning he walked into the throne room. The Iron Throne stood silent and sharp. He didn't sit on it. He stood before it, turned to the gathered lords and whispered one sentence that would define the fate of Westeros. "I don't want the throne, but I'll burn anyone who tries to steal it again." And somewhere in the distance, Drogon roared. Cersei Lannister didn't sleep that night. She stood on the balcony of Maegor's Holdfast, wine in hand, watching the city smolder under its own tension. The sight of a Stark Targaryen bastard standing in her court, legitimized no less by that self-righteous fool Ned, made her skin crawl. And now Daenerys, that silver-haired witch, was anchored outside the bay, her dragon perched like a god on Blackwater's edge. King's Landing wasn't just a city anymore. It was a matchbox soaked in wildfire. "I want him dead," she whispered. Jaime turned away from the window. "Which one?" She smiled without looking at him. "Both." Meanwhile, in the Tower of the Hand, Jon stood staring out over the capital, his fists clenched on the windowsill. The city disgusted him. The smell of rot and piss, the hunger, the whispers in the alleyways. People called him Your Grace now, but always with hesitation, always with an undertone of mockery or fear. He wasn't king. Not really. "Not yet. I never should have come here," he muttered. Ned stood behind him, face heavier than ever. "You didn't come here to rule, Jon. You came to survive. But sometimes surviving means standing in the fire, not fleeing from it." Jon turned, eyes sharp. "You lied to me." Ned didn't blink. "I protected you. There's a difference." The room fell into silence. Neither man could escape what had already begun. Outside these walls, the realm was fracturing. Lords from the Reach and the Riverlands were divided. Some supported Jon, swayed by the Stark name and the chance to resist Lannister power. Others whispered of Daenerys, the Dragon Queen with armies, ships and fire, and Dany. She didn't wait long. She marched through the city gates 2 days later, flanked by the Unsullied and her Blood Riders. The people didn't cheer. They stared. A silver-haired conqueror in foreign armor, beside a Stark-born prince. 2 Targaryens in the capital, both claiming the legacy of fire. In the great hall, the two stood before the small council, or what was left of it. Varys sat in silence, eyes flicking between them. Tyrion leaned against a pillar, sipping wine with a haunted smirk. Davos had arrived from Dragonstone, brought in by ravens from Ned. He stood awkwardly, clearly unsure whether this was salvation or madness. Daenerys spoke first. "The throne belongs to House Targaryen. My family built it. My ancestors bled for it. And I've crossed half the world to take back what's mine." Jon didn't argue, but he didn't bow either. "You say it's yours," he said quietly. "But how many people have to die before it finally is?" She stepped closer. "And what would you do? Rule from a distance? Hide behind your honor like your father did?" "I don't want the Iron Throne." "Then why are you here?" He stared her down. "Because someone has to stop you from burning it down." Boom. The tension in the room could have split the throne itself. Tyrion actually choked on his wine. But before either of them could move, a raven arrived, blood on its feathers. It came from the north. Winterfell had fallen. Jon took the message with trembling hands. Ramsay Bolton had seized the castle. Robb had marched south to rally bannermen for his father's cause, leaving Sansa and Bran behind. And now, the flayed man flew over the walls of Winterfell. Jon was already walking out the door. Daenerys followed. "What are you doing?" He didn't stop. "Going home. You can't leave now." "The throne. I don't care about your damn throne. My sister is in danger." Davos followed him without hesitation. So did Ned. But what no one expected was Dany's next words. "I'll come with you." Jon froze. "No dragons," he said. She raised her chin. "You need me. You'd burn half the north to take a castle. I'd burn it to save the people inside." He hesitated. Tyrion stepped forward, breaking the silence. "You two realize you might just be the most dangerous pair in Westeros, don't you?" Jon walked on. "That's not a good thing," but he didn't stop her from coming. They left King's Landing the next morning, a strange alliance of ice and fire, moving north with only a handful of trusted riders. Behind them, the capital buzzed with confusion. Cersei seized the moment. She tightened her grip on the gold cloaks. Had Pycelle resurrected from the dead, she would have sent him to the dungeons just to prove she still had teeth. She met with Qyburn. "Activate every spy in the north. Poison, blade, betrayal, I don't care how. That bastard boy doesn't reach Winterfell alive." Back in the north, Ramsay Bolton stood atop the battlements of Winterfell, skinning a man alive as a gift for the arriving king. Sansa was locked in her chambers, bruised but not broken. Bran was missing. No one knew how or when he had slipped away. But the snows whispered of a boy traveling north with wildlings beyond the wall, chasing visions and voices older than time. And the Night King? He waited, watching, knowing that the true war had not even begun, because now 2 Targaryens marched toward Winterfell, and the wall was beginning to crack. The wind in the north did not feel like wind anymore. It felt like teeth. It bit, chewed and ripped at every rider as Jon's party made their way across the frost-bitten road toward Winterfell. Snowstorm after snowstorm slowed their pace, but they pressed on. Jon rode ahead in silence. His thoughts churned louder than the blizzards. He saw Sansa's face in every gust of snow, imagined Ramsay's sick grin behind every shadow, Daenerys, cloaked in thick furs and flanked by Grey Worm, watched him with the caution of someone trying to understand a wildfire. She had travelled across seas to conquer Westeros, but this man was colder than the White Walkers she'd only heard of in whispers. They made camp near the last hearth. The small folk there had fled. The fires had long gone out. Burnt bodies were found near the stables. A message, clearly from Ramsay, a challenge. Davos walked up beside Jon as he fed the horses. "He's baiting you," Davos said. Jon nodded. "I know. And you'll go anyway." "She's my sister." Nearby, Daenerys spoke with Ned. "You knew," she said without emotion, "who Jon really was. And yet you never told him?" "I protected him. That was my duty. He has the blood of the dragon. He also has the blood of the wolf. Don't forget which raised him." Daenerys turned toward the fire. "He may not want the throne, but thrones have a way of finding men like him." The next morning, scouts returned. Bolton banners still flew above Winterfell, but the main gates were open, as if inviting slaughter. Jon didn't wait. He mounted his horse and led the charge without hesitation, and then came the screams. Arrows flew from hidden towers. Traps lay buried beneath the snow. 2 men died instantly. One lost half a leg to a spiked pit. Ramsay Bolton was already watching from the high tower, smirking behind a cup of hot wine. He didn't want to kill Jon Snow, he wanted to break him. Jon reached the outer wall. The gates slammed shut behind him. Inside the courtyard, bodies hung from wooden frames, flayed, eyes gouged, mouths sewn shut. Sansa's dress was nailed to the doors of the great hall. He dismounted and drew Longclaw. "Sansa!" he roared. His voice echoed like thunder. No answer. Daenerys stood beside him now. Grey Worm, Tyrion and Davos behind. The Unsullied had circled the walls. Drogon landed outside, roaring once, enough to shake the godswood. Ramsay appeared on the battlements, arms spread wide. "I've been expecting you," he called down. "The bastard returns," with another bastard at his side. How poetic, Jon stepped forward. "Where is she?" Ramsay grinned. "Safe, untouched for now. Unless, of course, you decide to burn my castle." Daenerys narrowed her eyes. "I've burned better men for less." "Oh, I have no doubt. But how well do dragons fly in the snow? How well do armies march when they've lost their way?" He clapped twice. The doors to the great hall opened, and Sansa walked out, alive, covered in furs, but cold as winter itself. Her eyes found Jon, but they didn't soften. "They didn't warm, Jon," she said flatly. "You shouldn't have come." He froze. "Sansa?" Ramsay stepped beside her, gently taking her arm. "She made her choice, Jon. She chose me." The tension snapped. Grey Worm stepped forward. Daenerys raised her hand, restraining her men. Tyrion leaned into Jon. "This is a trick." Jon's voice cracked. "Sansa, say it." "Say he's lying." Sansa stared at her brother, and then looked away. The wind screamed through the yard. "I didn't ask you to come, Jon," she whispered. "You left. You abandoned the north. You marched south chasing a throne. You left me here." Jon's mouth opened. Nothing came out. "She's been here for months," Ramsay said, smiling. "She's seen the truth. The world doesn't need heroes. It needs survivors. And I, dear brother, survive very well." Drogon roared again, shaking the walls. Daenerys turned to Jon, whispering, "We burn it now. We burn them all." But Jon didn't move. He couldn't. Then the arrow came. One of Ramsay's men fired from the walls, striking Grey Worm clean through the shoulder. He dropped with a grunt. It was war now. Daenerys mounted Drogon. Jon raised Longclaw. Davos unsheathed his sword. Tyrion ran for cover. The Unsullied stormed the gates, the Battle of Winterfell, not against the dead, but against betrayal had begun. Jon fought like a man possessed, cutting down Bolton men through snow and blood. Every step closer to the Great Hall felt like an eternity. Inside, Ramsay held Sansa close. "It's time," he whispered. "But Sansa!" She wasn't smiling. She stabbed him. The dagger slid beneath his ribs, clean and silent. He coughed, looked at her. Why? Her voice was colder than the winds outside. "Because I don't belong to any of you." She let him fall, and when Jon burst through the doors covered in blood, sword still wet, Sansa was already walking toward him. "I told you not to come," she said. He looked down at Ramsay's body, then up at her, and he wasn't sure if he had saved her, or if she had already saved herself. The fires in Winterfell burned into the next day, not from destruction but from cleansing. Bolton banners were torn down, flayed corpses were burned in silence, and the snow turned red in places where the dead refused to be forgotten. Jon walked through the shattered courtyard, with the weight of 1,000 choices dragging behind each step. Grey Worm survived, barely thanks to Maester Wolkan's trembling hands and Dany's refusal to leave his side. Tyrion counted the bodies. Davos helped bury them. Sansa watched it all from the balcony. Her face was unreadable. She hadn't cried when she killed Ramsay. She didn't cry now. "I should have come sooner," Jon said, joining her quietly. She didn't look at him. "You shouldn't have come at all." That answer hurt worse than any wound Jon had taken during the battle. "He broke you." She finally turned. Her eyes were sharp. "No, Jon, he taught me. He taught me how the game is played. You still think you can win by being good. You can't." Down below, Daenerys approached with Drogon behind her, wings folded tight. She looked at the two Stark children with fire in her eyes, the kind that never quite cooled. "You saved her," she said. Jon shook his head. "She saved herself." Daenerys tilted her head. "Then perhaps she's stronger than we realized." Sansa spoke before Jon could. "Stronger than you'll ever understand." The tension between them crackled like wildfire beneath stone. Tyrion interrupted mercifully. "It's not to ruin this heartfelt reunion, but we've received a raven." Jon turned to him. "From where?" "The wall," Tyrion said gravely. "Castle Black has fallen. That stopped everything." "What?" Daenerys asked. He nodded. "Burned, shattered, no survivors, and the dead are marching." The chill that swept through the room wasn't from the north wind. It came from something deeper, something ancient and terrifying. Jon stepped forward. "Did they break through the wall?" "No," Tyrion said slowly. "They walked through it. Like it wasn't even there," Davos cursed under his breath. Daenerys stared at the fire pit. Sansa clutched the edge of the stone wall until her knuckles turned white. "We were too slow," Jon muttered. "We wasted time fighting each other while they kept moving." Daenerys didn't hesitate. "We fly north. We burn them. Every last one." Tyrion frowned. "You've never fought the dead. Fire may work, but it's not enough. You can't burn a storm." Jon looked up. "Then we'll fight with everything. Wolves, dragons, fire, steel, whatever's left." But Sansa, still looking out over the snow, whispered one thing that chilled them more than the news itself. "What if we're too late already?" 2 days later, the council was held in the Great Hall of Winterfell. Representatives of the Vale had arrived, called by Raven. Jon Royce stood tall, demanding answers. From the Riverlands came remnants of House Tully. House Manderly sent scouts. The North was stirring again, trying to breathe after years of betrayal, war and fire. Jon stood before them all, not as king but as war leader. "The wall has fallen," he said. "The Night's Watch is gone. The dead are moving south, and if we don't stop them here at Winterfell, they will burn every city from the Dreadfort to Dawn." Some scoffed. Others stared in silence. Sansa added, "You all saw what the Boltons did. What happens when they come is worse." Daenerys stepped forward next. "I crossed an ocean to take the throne, but I will not sit on ashes. My dragons fight for the living now," the lords murmured. Most were uncertain, still afraid of her, still unsure of Jon. But the Stark name, the Targaryen dragons, and the proof of Castle Black's fall. It forced their hand. They pledged their swords. That night in the crypts below Winterfell, Jon stood before Lyanna Stark's statue. "You lied to me your whole life," he said, his voice low. "But I understand now. You were trying to protect me, and maybe you were right to. Daenerys approached silently. "You're not angry?" He glanced at her. "I don't have time to be," she studied him. "You're not like the others. You don't crave power. You carry it like it's a burden." Jon looked down. "That's because it is." She stepped closer. "The world will need someone after this. Someone to rebuild. I don't know if there'll be a world after this." Suddenly the horn sounded once, then again. Then a third time. Davos burst into the crypt. "They're here." Outside on the edge of the tree line, the snow was moving, not falling. It moved with intention. An army of white. Silent. Endless. The Night King stood at the front, flanked by generals with eyes like frozen hell. Winterfell had survived men. It had survived betrayal, but now they'd had to survive death itself. To survive death itself. The horns kept sounding. 3 long echoing calls that shuddered down every spine within Winterfell. 1 for friends, 2 for foes, 3 for death. Jon stood on the battlements, his breath fogging in the freezing air. Below him, thousands of soldiers scrambled into formation. The Unsullied stood like statues at the gates. The Knights of the Vale lined the flanks, and northern bannermen filled the inner courtyard. Mormonts, Umbers, Karstarks, Glovers. All of them ready to die. Daenerys hovered above on Drogon, Rhaegal beside them, wings beating like war drums. The dragons were uneasy, not just because of the cold, but because of what approached it, and what approached was silence, no banners, no roars, no chaos, just snow falling gently onto an army of corpses that didn't breathe, didn't speak, didn't wait. The Night King stopped just outside bow range. He didn't draw a blade. He didn't speak, he stared. His gaze swept across Winterfell like a cold hand dragging across your soul. Then he raised one finger. The dead surged forward. "Loose arrows!" Jon shouted. A storm of steel flew from the walls, raining down on the first wave. But they didn't stop. Not even when arrows pierced eye sockets or shattered frozen skulls. The whites climbed over the dead, scaling their bodies like ants, crawling toward the walls like an unstoppable tide. Drogon dove first. A blast of fire incinerated hundreds in a blink, clearing a path, but as soon as Drogon banked, the dead reformed, rising from the ash, bodies still burning but moving. Sansa stood inside the Great Hall, helping load injured men onto stretchers. Gilly, Baby Sam, and a group of villagers were crammed into the crypts. Everyone said they'd be safe there. Everyone was wrong, because the dead didn't come just from the north. They came from beneath. Below in the crypts, a boy screamed. Then bones shattered through stone as ancient kings clawed from their tombs. Skulls missing, jaws, skeletons in ancient furs. Stark ancestors rose from their graves, dragged by dark magic and long-forgotten hate. Gilly grabbed her baby and ran. A woman was pulled into the dark by clawed hands. A man's throat was ripped open by the very corpse he'd once lit candles for. Sansa heard the screams. She drew a blade, not a sword, a dagger, but it would do. She ran toward the crypts, toward death. On the wall, Jon and Davos fought shoulder to shoulder, blades clashing against rotten limbs. The sky burned, but the fire never lasted long. Every death brought only a moment. And then Jon saw him, the Night King. He walked through the battlefield untouched, flanked by white giants, his generals trailing behind like icy shadows. He made no sound, but everywhere he passed, the living died screaming. Jon leapt from the battlement. He landed hard, rolling into the snow, Longclaw flashing in his grip. The Night King looked at him. Jon charged. Rhaegal screamed overhead. Then something struck him, a javelin of ice. The dragon howled, spiraling through the air, crashing into the godswood behind the castle. Daenerys screamed his name. Her heart ripped in two. She turned Drogon in rage and dove for the Night King, fire burning in her throat. She unleashed a blast of dragonfire that lit up the sky, hotter than anything Winterfell had ever seen. It engulfed the Night King, and he stood there. In the flames, unburnt, unmoved, smiling, Jon reached him as the flames cleared. He swung Longclaw, a perfect arc aimed for the Night King's back. But the Night King turned and caught the blade. With a strength that didn't belong to anything alive, he shoved Jon back with a flick of his hand. Jon flew into the snow. The Night King raised both arms. The bodies around them, northern men, Vale knights, unsullied, even Mormonts, began to rise. Again, Jon stared as the very men who died protecting him now walked toward him, blades in hand, eyes pale as death. In the crypts, Sansa fought through chaos. She stabbed one corpse in the eye. Another grabbed her arm. She fell, screamed, and then Arya appeared, silent, swift, death itself. She killed 3 with a dragonglass blade before Sansa even stood up. Blood sprayed the walls. Bones shattered. Arya pulled Sansa up. "You're not dying down here." Sansa, breathless, looked her sister in the eye. "I thought you left," Arya smirked. "I did. Then I saw the world needed killing again." They ran. In the courtyard, Daenerys circled back to Jon. She landed Drogon beside him and screamed, "Get on!" He didn't hesitate. He mounted, and they took off just as the reanimated corpses swarmed the ground he'd been lying on seconds before. Above, the air was thick with snow, smoke, and dragon blood. Rhaegal limped into the sky again, wounded but alive. The Night King watched from below. Unshaken, he drew his second ice spear and threw at Drogon. Banked left, narrowly dodging death, but he wasn't aiming for Dragon, he was aiming for Rhaegal. The spear struck the wounded dragon again, this time. He didn't recover. Rhaegal crashed into the outer wall of Winterfell and exploded into fire, smoke, and sorrow. Jon screamed. Daenerys sobbed, and the Night King still smiled. The crash of Rhaegal's broken body shattered the godswood, splintering ancient trees and flinging stone like shrapnel. Jon's heart nearly tore from his chest as he watched the dragon, his dragon, disappear beneath a plume of flame and rubble. Somewhere deep inside, the sound Rhaegal made as he fell would haunt him forever. Daenerys didn't speak. She didn't cry. Her scream never came. Only silence. Fur deep, terrifying silence that seemed to drain the warmth from the world. And then she turned. Drogon roared, rising high into the sky, fire already crackling in his throat. The Night King stood alone in the courtyard of Winterfell. Bodies of the dead swarmed around him like moths to ice. Daenerys whispered, "Burn him. Burn all of them." Jon didn't argue. Drogon dove. This time he didn't unleash fire in a controlled line. He bathed the battlefield in it. Inferno rained from the heavens. Corpses turned to ash. Whites disintegrated mid-scream. The very snow evaporated beneath the heat of dragon flame. The Night King disappeared inside the fire once again, but Jon didn't wait to see if he'd survived. He leapt from Drogon's, back before the flames even cleared, landing in the snow with a grunt, rolling into a run. Sword already drawn, the smoke parted. The Night King still stood, still unburnt. This time, he moved, fast, too fast. He charged Jon like a silent storm, frost exploding with every step. Their blades met with a sound like breaking ice. Longclaw clashed with the Night King's spear. Jon felt the cold sink into his bones instantly. It numbed his fingers, froze his breath in his lungs, but he didn't back down. He struck again, again, each blow barely missed. The Night King moved with inhuman grace, like a creature who'd fought for 1,000 years and never lost once. Jon was fighting death itself, and he was losing. Meanwhile, inside the castle walls, Arya and Sansa emerged from the crypts, faces pale, weapons red. The courtyard was chaos. Whites surged over the battlements. Northern soldiers screamed. Davos was still standing, blade flashing, one eye nearly swollen shut. Arya scanned the battlefield. "Where is he?" she asked. Sansa followed her gaze. "He's gone after the Night King," Arya nodded. "Then I'm going after him." Sansa grabbed her arm. "Oh, he won't come back." Arya didn't smile, didn't hesitate. Neither will he. She ran. Outside the walls, Jon stumbled backward as the Night King shattered his footing with a blow. Longclaw flew from his hand, embedding into the snow several feet away. The Night King raised his spear for the killing strike, and then whistle. A dagger flew through the air, striking the Night King's shoulder. He turned and saw her, Arya Stark, small, swift, silent. The girl he didn't know existed until now. He moved to strike, as fast as lightning. She ducked, spun, and leapt, her blade, Valyrian steel, aimed straight for his chest, but he caught her by the throat, lifted her into the air like she weighed nothing. Jon screamed. "No!" Arya's dagger clattered to the ground. She choked, kicking, clawing. The Night King tilted his head as if curious. Then slowly he began to crush, and then her hand went to her belt. She pulled a second dagger, dragonglass, and she plunged it into his chest, right beneath the ribs, right where the heart used to be. The Night King froze. His eyes widened. Cracks split across his chest. white, glowing lines that spread like spiderwebs. Then he exploded. Ice shards flew in all directions. His body shattered into 100 pieces. The cold stopped, and across the battlefield, every single wight collapsed. Thousands fell where they stood. The ground shook. The air warmed. The storm began to clear. Arya hit the ground, gasping for breath. Jon rushed to her side. "You," he whispered. "You killed him." She coughed, smiled faintly. "I told you." "I don't miss." High above, Daenerys saw the army crumble. Drogon circled once, then descended. She climbed off slowly, the fire in her blood now cooled by awe and fear. Jon and Arya stood in the snow, surrounded by the dead who no longer moved. She looked at them both. Then, to everyone's shock, she knelt before Arya. "You saved us all," she said. Arya looked deeply uncomfortable. "Can we not do this right now?" The survivors gathered what they could. The losses were enormous. Rhaegal was dead. Half the North's bannermen were gone. The Vale had been gutted, but they had won. Winterfell still stood. And the Night King was no more. That night the fires burned not in battle, but in memory. Jon stood in the Godswood alone. Snow fell softly again, not harsh, not cruel. Just snow. Daenerys joined him, slow and quiet. "You knew it wasn't going to be you," she said. Jon nodded. "It was never supposed to be me. And yet, they still follow you." He turned to her. "Do you?" Her answer didn't come, not with words. She kissed him, but far away. Across the sea, in the shadows of Valyria. Something stirred because the Night King was not born. He was made, and magic, old cold magic, never truly dies, never truly dies. The morning fires hadn't even gone out before the politics began. Winterfell's courtyards were still soaked in blood, ash and melted snow. Piles of white corpses were being hauled into great pyres. Survivors moved like ghosts, hollow-eyed, burned, broken. But their minds were already drifting south, because the Night King was gone. The long night was over, and now it was time to decide who would rule. Jon stood by Rhaegal's grave, just a blackened crater behind the Godswood. He hadn't spoken much since the battle ended. He didn't cry, didn't eat. He simply stared at the spot where the dragon he'd flown into war had died protecting him. Daenerys found him there. "He died like a king," she said gently. Jon didn't look at her. "He died because of me." "No," she said, stepping closer. "He died because the world needed saving. You think that's something you carry alone? You think the blood on your hands makes you unworthy?" "I don't want a crown." Daenerys' voice softened. "You keep saying that like it matters." Inside the great hall, the lords and ladies gathered. The North, the Vale, the Riverlands, the Reach sent no one. The Westerlands, silent. Cersei was still in the Red Keep, still wearing her crown, still claiming the Iron Throne. But now the kingdom had two dragon-blooded victors, one crowned in prophecy, the other in fire, and the realm was watching. Sansa stood near the front, posture regal, wounds wrapped tight. Arya beside her, as still and unreadable as a shadow. Davos stood behind Jon. Tyrion flanked Daenerys, eyes flicking between the factions like a man watching wolves circle meat. Varys spoke first. "The dead have been defeated, but if we let the living fall back into old ways, all of this will have been for nothing." Sansa cut in sharply. "And what way is that, Lord Varys? Crowning foreign queens who burn cities." Daenerys' eyes flashed. "I burn the dead. You burned my home once," Sansa snapped. Tyrion stepped between them. "Enough. We have enemies to the south. Queen Cersei has not surrendered. She's gathered mercenaries. The Golden Company is already at her gates. She will not kneel. So we must decide who we are following into that war." Eyes turned to Jon, all of them. Jon took his time stepping forward. He didn't want the eyes. He didn't want the power. But he saw the truth in their faces, and in Daenerys's. If he didn't say something now, everything would collapse. "I'm not a king," he said simply. "I never wanted to be. I still don't, but I know this. If we fight each other after all we've lost, if we let pride divide us now, then the Night King wins after all, because he wanted us dead. And Cersei wants the same." He looked to Daenerys. "She has dragons. She has armies. But she didn't do this alone. We all bled for this. Every man and woman who stood on these walls. They all deserve to choose what comes next." Daenerys stepped forward beside him. "The world we're building isn't built on bloodlines anymore," she said. "It can't be." Not after this. So if you want me to lead, I will. But not because of my name, not because of dragons, because you choose it. The hall went silent, and then Jon Royce stepped forward. I fought for House Stark, for the North. But if we march on King's Landing, I'll follow him. Tormund spoke up next from the back of the room, half drunk. The bastard swings a sword better than any man I've seen. That's good enough for me, others murmured. Some nodded. A few bowed their heads, but they didn't declare for Daenerys. Not directly. They declared for Jon, which made Daenerys smile, tightly, beautifully, bitterly, because now it was clear. They didn't hate her. They just didn't love her the way they loved him. That night, Daenerys stood on the ramparts alone, watching Drogon fly lazy circles above the trees. Tyrion joined her with a flask of northern wine. He's becoming the symbol, she said. Not me. Symbols are dangerous, Tyrion replied. They can be worshipped. Or destroyed. She looked down. He's too honest to survive this. Then perhaps it's you who'll have to survive it for him. She turned to him. And if I want more than survival? Tyrion drank. Then you'll have to fight the one man who never wanted to fight you. In the dark corners of the great hall, Sansa and Arya spoke quietly. You saw her face, Arya said. She's not going to let this go. She doesn't have to, Sansa whispered. As long as Jon bends the knee, we hold the North. That's all that matters. Arya looked her sister in the eye. And if he doesn't? Sansa's voice hardened. Then we make sure he can't. Arya tilted her head. You're thinking like Littlefinger. I learned from the best, Sansa said. Neither smiled. As dawn broke, Jon stood in the godswood, sword sheathed, cloak heavy with frost. Daenerys joined him in silence. Is this where your father died? She asked. He nodded. And you still think honor's worth anything? I don't know, Jon said. But I know what happens when you lose it. She looked at him carefully. We need to make a choice, Jon, you and I, together, or not at all. He looked at her, but before he could answer, a raven landed, not just any raven, a royal seal. Lannister crimson, gold wax. Jon broke it open and read the words. His face went white. Daenerys stepped forward. What is it? Jon handed her the letter. It read, King's Landing burns in 10 days. The North is next. Choose now. Crown or ashes? Queen Cersei Lannister. Ashes? Queen Cersei Lannister. 10 days, that's what the letter promised. And in Westeros, promises like that were always made in blood. King's Landing would burn. Cersei had no reason to bluff. She had wildfire buried beneath the city, thousands of barrels left over from the Mad King, a secret she'd stolen from her own dead father. With the Golden Company at her back and Qyburn's twisted science in her arsenal, she didn't need dragons. She needed fear, and fear was a weapon Cersei knew how to wield better than anyone alive. Jon called a war council that same day. The great hall of Winterfell was packed with soldiers, commanders, and survivors. At the center, Jon, Daenerys, Sansa, Tyrion, Davos, Arya, and Grey Worm stood around the war table, eyes scanning the map. Tyrion pointed to the Crown Lands. We can't march the entire northern host in time. Not before she makes good on her threat. Jon's jaw tightened. We ride with the dragons. A smaller force, fast and light. Hit her before the wildfire ignites. Daenerys nodded. I'll take Drogon. He moves faster alone. We hit the Red Keep first. Cut the head off the snake. Sansa's voice cut through. And if this is what she wants, to lure you in, to kill the dragon and the Targaryens in one strike. She won't kill me, Jon said. Arya raised an eyebrow. And why not? Jon's eyes darkened. Because she wants the North to kneel. She thinks if I die, it will. Sansa didn't deny it. Davos spoke up, calm but firm. There's no time for pride. We need to strike now before she buries half the realm in fire. Tyrion stepped back, clearly uneasy. There are thousands of innocents in that city. If we storm the gates with dragons and fury, we become the very monsters we fought to destroy. Daenerys looked him dead in the eye. And if we don't, they die anyway. That night, Jon and Daenerys met in private one last time before the march. The fire in her chambers had burned low. She stood at the window, looking out over the snowy expanse of Winterfell, her hair braided like a queen's, her eyes tired but sharp. I don't know what kind of world we're building after this, she said, but I want it to be with you. Jon stepped closer. And if the realm says otherwise? The realm's had enough kings, she said. Let it have something better. He took her hand, but in his heart the doubt still lingered. Because deep down, Jon Snow knew something always breaks before a new world begins. The next morning they rode, Jon, Daenerys, Arya, Grey Worm, and 100 elite riders. Drogon flew overhead, circling the clouds. The North stayed behind, holding Winterfell. Sansa watched them leave with eyes like ice. Tyrion rode beside Jon, quiet. "You think she'll burn it all?" Jon asked. "I think if Cersei forces her hand," Tyrion said, "she'll burn more than that." Jon looked up at the dragon in the sky. "Then I pray she kills Cersei quick." 5 days into the ride, scouts returned with news. The Golden Company had fortified the city. Qyburn had reforged wildfire barrels into siege traps along the walls. And on the walls themselves stood crossbows, dozens, bigger than anything ever used against dragons before Cersei was ready. But what no one expected, what no one believed until they saw it with their own eyes, was who stood beside her, Jaime. Lannister, alive, armored, and silent. They reached King's Landing at dawn. On the 7th day, the sky was overcast. The city looked almost peaceful from the hills. Golden domes, white towers, winding streets. But under the surface, you could feel it. The tension, the trap. Drogon landed behind a ridge. Daenerys dismounted. Jon walked beside her, looking down at the walls. A banner flew above the red keep, not Lannister crimson. Cersei's challenge. Daenerys turned to Jon. "No more waiting," she said. "No more mercy." He didn't stop her, but as she mounted Drogon, Arya appeared at his side. "You trust her?" Arya asked. Jon didn't answer, because he didn't know. Drogon screamed and took to the sky. The siege began. Daenerys flew fast, weaving through the towers, burning every scorpion bolt before they could fire. Soldiers screamed. Lannister men scattered. The Golden Company turned and ran, half of them ablaze before they could even draw swords. The city rang with chaos, but the gates held. The wildfire traps had not yet ignited. Cersei was waiting, watching from her balcony. Inside the Red Keep, Cersei sipped wine, calm as ever. Qyburn stood beside her, hands folded. "She'll come here," he said. Cersei smiled. "Good, let her." Jaime didn't move. His golden hand flexed slightly. His face was unreadable. "You don't have to do this," he said quietly. Cersei turned to him slowly. "I already have." Daenerys soared over the Red Keep. She saw the balcony. She saw her. Cersei, smiling, daring her. Drogon roared, but then a horn blew from the streets below. A Lannister soldier held a child in his arms. Waving a white cloth all around the city, bells began to ring. "Surrender." Jon looked up from the street. "It's over," he breathed. Daenerys hovered in the sky. The bells rang. She closed her eyes. She could end it now. She had the choice. Then, her eyes opened, and they were full of fire. And they were full of fire.